Hear me. Oh, there we go. Got to be able to hear me. Welcome to Thursday night's English meeting. Hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving and going to start the Christmas season off with a bang. And what else? Oh, and if you have your cell phones, please turn them down to vibrate or silent. So, with that, let's begin. We'll start with a prayer or a reading from Happy Life, followed by our opening prayer. Then we'll have our speaker for the evening, followed by vibrations, and then passes. Allow people to finish what they are saying without interrupting. Of course, there is a limit to this. However, if you listen, you will be better prepared to enlighten them. If you interrupt, you might reach the wrong conclusion and miss out on what they are trying to tell you. I do that with my boy sometimes. Not everyone can express themselves easily, and they sometimes go in circles or are unclear. Seek to grasp the main idea in dialogue without impatience or exasperation. Don't impose your thoughts or try to stop others from voicing ideas different than yours. Our opening prayer. Heavenly Father, as we begin our meeting tonight, we thank you for this opportunity. Send the good spirits to guide our lesson tonight. May it not only reach our minds, but our hearts as well. May we always be focused on what is right. May we make us an example here on earth for all those to see. Watch over our families and friends, that they may also be your guiding light here on earth. And we begin by saying, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. So that all being said, I'd like to invite our friend Rudy Souza for tonight's presentation.
Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing tonight? Is it a little chilly out there? Just a little, right? Well, it is a pleasure to be here again. It is always a pleasure being here. I really cherish this moment. It gives me the opportunity to share what I've been studying with you, and at the same time, learn as well. And tonight, if you do feel like interrupting, please do so. I give you permission.
That's your idea.
I might welcome a anytime interruption. So as I was preparing for the talk tonight, it all of a sudden hit me that we are already in December. So we are already at the end of this year. And for as long as this year seemed to be, it feels like it just went so fast, right? So just about a year ago, December 2019, we registered the first case of coronavirus. And now it's been about a year from that, exactly a year from that day, and it has spread throughout the world. It turned into a pandemic. 65 million people have already been infected. We have lost about 1.5 million lives to the pandemic. And it still continues, right? So every year we have a challenge or two. It's normal, right? We always face difficulties and hardships. But it just feels like 2020 was especially hard. And something novel came about, and we all of a sudden we had to learn how to live with this. So it also shows how resilient we can be, right? That's something that came out of nowhere. We had to make it into our normal lives. And we have all suffered with this together as a human race, as a community, as countries, and it spared nobody. It didn't matter if we were a first world country, if we were a poor country, if we're rich or poor. Everybody has suffered with this, and everybody had to make adjustments, right? We all had to change something in our lives. So in a year like this, when we look back, do we find reasons to be thankful? What do you guys think? Can we find reasons to be thankful when we look back into 2020 and we think about all the tears that we shed, all the pain that we went through, right? Family lost, friends lost. Yes. We have so much to be thankful for. Even with all the pain and all the suffering that we have gone through, there is a number of things that we can be thankful for, right? We can be thankful for our families. We had the opportunity to slow down a little bit, reevaluate our lives, spend more time with the ones that we love, the ones that are closest to us. Maybe opportunities that we wouldn't have had otherwise. So that's a reason to be thankful for, right? We are all here. That's another reason to be thankful for. We can be thankful for our families, right? And not only family blood ties, but our extended family. So when we look at our planet, we are a family, right? Our communities, we are a family. People who are working in the hospitals to help us, those are family. This center, right? This is a family as well. How many of us come here, right, heavy and burdened? And when you get here, you can let go of your day, you can let go of your weight, you can receive that boost of energy and love and healing. And all of a sudden you're feeling better, right? So we have so much to be thankful for. Imagine if we didn't have any of this, how hard it would have been to go through this. Would have been much harder. Some people would probably say that would have been impossible to get through something like this. But together we can do, right? One depending on the other. And this is something that it took a pandemic to teach us, that it's not only about us, it's not only about what we do individually, but what we do as a planet matters. How we behave as a planet matters, right? And yesterday was a especially hard day for our country. Now think about it, we are the most powerful nation in this world, yet we have been hit the hardest. Why is that? Right? Well, it doesn't discriminate. Being good in one thing doesn't mean that we are immune to something else. And yesterday we had over 200,000 cases, and we lost almost 3,000 brothers and sisters. And it is something that we have to stop and think about, because those are souls that have left loved ones behind, right? Could be a neighbor, could be a friend. So we have to acknowledge everything that we're going through. And even though many of us would like to pretend that this is not happening or that it's better not to talk about it, we have to talk about it, right? We have to think of all these lives of everybody who is departing. So I would like to invite yourselves for later tonight, sometime this week, when you're home, when you have a minute, right? Have a conversation with God, just you and God, and thank Him. Thank Him for the blessings that we have all received through this pandemic. Thank Him for the fact that we are still here. Thank Him for the teachings that all this pain and the suffering brought us, because there are many lessons, right? And we are still learning. And take a minute to honor our brothers and our sisters who have already departed, right? Ask for them to receive assistance, for them to be received with love, for them to be gifted with understanding, because it has to be hard for you to be here and all of a sudden you are in a different world. That may that world be filled with love and hope for them for a new life, right? And ask for love and healing for the loved ones who are still here, who had to say goodbye, maybe sometimes too soon. So take a minute of your time whenever you have this week to remember and to honor those who are no longer with us and those who are here who are still in a lot of suffering, right? And be thankful for this house, because we can come here and we can talk about these things and we can let go of some of this pain and some of this suffering. Now, it's also December, right? And with December comes Christmas. And Christmas is a great time of the year.
I was messing with the thing there. You might want to read.
Oh, thank you, Valdo.
Sorry. You want to close and open?
Let's see. Okay. So we can all say that going through this, right, we're getting ready for something much better, because hardship often prepares an ordinary person for an extraordinary destiny. So we're having a crash course in being great. This is also something else to thank for, right? And then obviously, Christmas is the perfect time to be thankful. This is the moment where we celebrate the birth of the Christ and everything that followed his birth. And when we think of Jesus, think about his life, how hard it was. He was persecuted before he was even born, right? And look at his legacy. Look at his teachings. Look at all that he left for us. So whenever you guys can, take a minute, have a conversation with God, open yourselves up, and thank him for all the good that we had in 2020. Because we are able to see that, right? Now, who here likes stories? Yes, stories. I'm gonna do something a little different tonight. Like stories, right? When was the last time that somebody told you a story? God, it's been a while for me. I can't even remember, right? But tonight I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you a story of perseverance, of learning, of conquering oneself, of being able to forgive, and of being able to love. It's an Egyptian tale, and it's called The Little Red Fish. Yes, that's right. I'm going to tell you the story of a fish. And it's a fish other than Nemo. So, the little red fish. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful pond in the middle of a garden. This pond was covered with lily plants and all kinds of aquatic life. And in that pond, there was a huge community of fish. They all swam around, eating worms and little fruits that fell on the water. They always slapped around with nothing else to do. And that little community, they elect a king. So they had a kingfish who didn't do much. He also ate worms and he slept around. So the king and his followers took over the best caves there were. Everywhere they could be inhabited, there they were, doing nothing but eating and sleeping. But in the middle of all that fish, there was a tiny little red fish who was too small to compete with the other ones, who was not welcome or accepted, who couldn't even get a worm to eat. He had to survive on scraps. He was battered by the sun because he didn't have a place to sleep. All the houses had been taken away. All the places had been taken from him. And he wasn't accepted in the middle of the other ones. And they could care less for this little red fish. So he had no other option but to just swim around and try to get by. So he thought to himself, well, what can I do? How about if I start to learn things? There's not much I can do. I can't take a house. I can't compete for worms. I'm not even big enough. I'm so skinny. So he started to study that little world of his. He wrote down every single tile there was around that pond. He made a map of every single cave there was, all the plants he could find. He even knew where the mud would be if it was raining. And then one day he had learned everything there was to learn about the little world. And then on one corner of that pond, he saw a little door. It's like, oh, what is that? It was a tiny little trap door that led somewhere. So he went to investigate. And he realized that after learning all of that was to be learned in that little world, that could be something else past the door. But he couldn't quite fit in there yet. So he understood that he had to make more sacrifices in order to find a way to squeeze through that tight little hole. And so he did. And one day, with a lot of sacrifices, with a lot of pain, with a lot of time spent in trying to do just that, he was able to squeeze through that tight little hole. And all of a sudden, he found himself in a canal, and he kept on swimming and kept on swimming. And then that canal led him to a creek. When he got to that creek, he realized that that was a brand new world. And there was so much that he hadn't seen. Colorful flowers all around, new plants, big majestic trees. Even the sky had opened up. All things that he didn't have in his little primitive world of before. So once again, he thought, wow, there is much to do and much to learn. And back to learning he went. And he mapped that entire little world again. And a lot of time he spent trying to learn new lessons, trying to get to know all the plants, all the animals. Then he said, well, I've known everything there is to know in this little world. What else is out there? So he started to swim down the creek. And one day, before he knew, he found a new world. This time it was a river that ran in the middle of a city. Oh, was there things to learn this time? Buildings and constructions, he had no idea what there were. Animals that walked on two legs. He saw boats and castles, all kinds of creatures. And in that world, he found other types of fishes, all kinds of fishes, and some of them welcomed him. So he found himself a family, and he found himself mentors and guides that were willing to share with him the knowledge that they had. And in that world, he acquired more knowledge, and he put in practice all the lessons he was offered. And he studied and he studied and he mastered and he's mastered. And swimming he continued. So the tiny little fish just kept on swimming, kept on swimming, kept on swimming. One day he realized that all the castles, all the fish, all the trees, all the animals, all the boats, everything in that little world was known to him. So inspired by those who were teaching him, he understood that it was time to swim again. And down the river he went, crossing the city into the jungles. And then one day, after swimming through that creek and learning all there was to learn, after going through the river that ran through that majestic city and learning all there was to learn, he got to the ocean. Wow, this is a superior world, he thought. And he was amazed, and he was in awe. Wow, I thought I had learned so much. I come from worlds that at the time seemed to be infinite. And now here I am in this glorious place. And as soon as he's thinking and he's enticed by everything he's seen, he sees a whale just coming on by. He had never seen anything like that. Wow, this is the biggest fish I've ever seen in my life. What is this? And he got very curious. He wasn't thinking. I didn't think it was dangerous or anything. He was curious and not careful. So he swims up to this whale, and before he knew, the whale swallows him up with all the plankton it was eating. Scared and confused, not knowing what was happening, he found himself in a very dark place. He didn't know what to do. What have I done? How did I get here? How do I get out? There is no way out. I am lost. Is this the end? The little red fish was thinking. And then he goes, it can't be. So when there was nothing else to do, no help around, and he didn't see another end but the end, he prayed. So he raised his thoughts to the God of the fish, and he asked for help when he found himself in his darkest place. And he was heard. The whale started to move around, and all of a sudden it trashed so much that it regurgitated all of what it had eaten out. And out with that came the little red fish. And he was so happy. He was happy he was alive. He wasn't angry because he was in a dark place. He didn't think about that anymore. He had been heard. He's free again. He's out again. So he thought, wow, This is an opportunity that I have to keep on learning and keep on pushing and keep on swimming. So swimming he went. And in this brave new world, he saw things that he never thought were possible. So he saw stars at the bottom of the ocean. He saw all kinds of fish and colors. The sky was so big and so immense, he couldn't count the stars. He couldn't count the planets. And in that world, he met other fish, hundreds of fish, that just like him had spent their lives studying and preparing and getting ready for something bigger. And by pushing himself and moving forward, all of a sudden he found himself in a place that he could not even conceive. He had found his palace, a place where peace reigned. There was nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. He had so many enlightened fish just like him, who had worked and sacrificed so much. And now they were in this superior world filled with colors and love and light and everything he hoped for and 1,000 more. So one day they're talking and they're thinking and they're talking about lives that they had that now seem so far away. Just a blink memory of where they began. And then he learned that in this beautiful world where everything is abundant, nothing will ever falter. But he also learned that there are times where very hard and trying and difficult times come, and it affects all of the other worlds, with the exception of this, because in this world, everything converges to it. So there's always an abundance of everything. And when he learned about the possibility of the end for others, the first thing he thought about was the world he began in. And he thought about all the fish that had mocked him, that had belittled him, that didn't care for him, that paid no attention to him. And all of a sudden, he was taken by sadness. How could this be? One day, their world will come to an end. So inspired by the fish around him that were just like him, or even more, he decided that he had to make it back to that world. He had to share with those fish the wonderful things he had learned. So without thinking about the sacrifices and what it would cost him, he started to swim. And he left the ocean, went up the river, into the creek, into the canal, squeezed himself through that tight little door, and back on the pond where he began he was. And once he got there, he immediately got to work. He started going around and trying to tell people, to tell all the other fish, everything he had learned. And he was trying to get their attention and telling them, hey, I am back, I am here. I have so much to tell you. None of the fish had even realized he left. Once again, they paid no attention to him. But he didn't give up on them. It's like, no, I have to find a way to share all of this with them. So he went to the king. And out of mockery, the king looked at him and says, okay, let's get all the fish together so you can tell them your stories. And he called up a meeting and all the fish came, and there was the little red fish trying to speak and saying, hey, there is a world out there, many worlds after this one. This is not all there is. There's so much to learn and so much to do. And he told them about the kingfish and the parrotfish and about the whales and the dolphins and the stars at the bottom of the ocean, and as many planets as you can possibly count, and a lot more, and how bigger the stars were, and how many colors there were on the creek, and all the things he saw in the river, and all the life he found outside that tiny little pond. But nobody paid attention. And they mocked and laughed. And some of the fish took onto the floor and said, "You are crazy. There is no such thing. There is no life outside this life. There is no other worlds out there. There is nothing else besides this. You are insane." Then some other fish jump on and they're like, "Well, there is something else. I speak for the God of the fish. And our God is all powerful and he only looks at us. There is no other creature anywhere else. This is what it is. And I'm speaking in the name of God." And he kept trying to convince them and telling them, "No, this is not it. But there are things you have to do. You can't just go through that door. There are sacrifices you have to make. There are things you have to learn. You have to prepare yourself in order for you to discover this other world. What are you talking about? We have a great life here. We have all the warm we can eat. We have a place to sleep. We're lazy and fat." And so, well, all of this will come to an end. But once again, nobody paid attention. So the king, once again, out of mockery, said, "Well, take me to this gate. I will go with you." So once they got to the tiny little door, before even getting close to it, the king looks at him and says, "I can even fit my fin through that. What are you thinking? You are insane little red fish. You need to get out of here. Don't ever come back." And very sad and feeling defeated, the little red fish got through that hole, swam through the canal, into the creek, through the river, back to the ocean, and found himself back in his palace. And there he spent many and many years thinking about how to get the other fish to understand the wonderful things he now knew. And one day, before he even knew, a drought came. And it dried up the little pond. And with that, even with the water, there went all the fish in the mud. Well, this story I got from one of my favorite books. It's called Liberation. And if you hadn't had the opportunity to read this book, I believe we do have some copies up front. It was psychographed by Chico Xavier, dictated by André Luiz. It is one of my favorite books. It tells the story of a mother who is attempting to rescue her son from darkness. And he has spent hundreds and hundreds of years in pure darkness, but she never gave up on him. So now she's planning his rescue, and she enlists many other spirits. And one thing that, as you read the book, you come to understand is that many of the other spirits themselves were parents to either incarnate spirits or spirits in the spiritual world. And throughout the book, one by one, helped to rescue their kids in order to get to the goal that they were there. So it is a book about family. It is a book about love. It is a book that tells us that it doesn't matter if we were the son or a daughter of someone in this life, 2 lives ago, 15 lives ago. That bond and that love is never broken, and it is there forever. So the love that that spirit had for her son, hundreds of years after she had been his mother, was as alive and as vibrant as it was when they shared a life together. So the reason why I wanted to share this with you is because it is inspiring to think that even though we may say goodbye to someone today, tomorrow, or maybe we are the ones waving goodbye, the love of those that we shared here will forever be with us. And that bond will never be broken. But when we look at the story of the little red fish, we're like, well, why did you tell me a story of a fish, right? But when we look at that story, we can see in that story all the teachings of Spiritism, right? If we really think about it, everything is in there. So the Spiritist doctrine gives actual form to what Jesus said about the promised counselor, right? It enlightens us as to where we came from, where we're going, and why we are on earth. Further, it reminds all to observe God's law and to find comfort in the faith and hope of a better future. And you can find this in the Gospel according to Spiritism. So if you think about our lives, when that little fish was in the pond and it was trying to learn everything there was to learn about the place, that is the beginning of our lives as a spirit, right? We come to a world and we have to master all there is, and we can't go anywhere before we have learned all there is to learn, before we have applied all the teachings in our lives. So in the beginning of what he was doing, he had to deal with a lot of selfishness and he had to deal with a lot of ego, right? I mean, just think about everybody around him. They weren't concerned about him, right? They weren't loving the other as they loved themselves. They were loving themselves and putting themselves first. But he was able to transcend that. And that opened the door to a new world for him. And that is the same thing that we should be striving to do, right? We should be striving to learn, to acquire all this knowledge, so we can transcend this life into a different world, maybe, into a superior world. Just like he left the primitive little world he lived in and went on to discover a brand new one, so can we. Great demand sacrifices, and sometimes we have to go through pain in order to do that. But it is rewarding, right? And as he went on his journey, he met other people, he met other fish. They were sharing with him knowledge and teaching, much like what happens to us. As we are going on our journey, we come to meet others who have gone through what we are going through, who try to show us a better way of doing things, right? Who try to tell us how to do things, but what do? We blind ourselves to them sometimes, right? We don't listen. We're just like the fat, lazy fish in the muddy pond sometimes. That is us sometimes, right? How many times have we done that? I know I've done that countless times and probably would do many more. I'm still learning. When I think of that journey, I'm not even close to finding the tight little hole to squeeze through. But the fact that we are all here, it tells me that we have already started to swim. So all we have to do is what? Is keep on swimming, right? Because better things are coming for us as well. We can't give up. And as he goes on his journey, he meets animals and beasts, and then he finds himself in a very dark place, right? And sometimes when we find ourselves in a dark place, what do? We give up. But we shouldn't. We have to do what he did. When we find ourselves in a dark place where we think that there's nothing else to do, that this is the end, we have to raise our hands to our God, to our Father, and we have to ask. And when that prayer is pure, when it comes from the heart, and when you humble yourself, and when we humble ourselves, he will always answer. Always. Sometimes we might not understand his answer, but it is there, right? I mean, Jesus asked himself, right? Jesus looked at the sky and he said, God, Father, why have you forsaken me? He knew he hadn't been forsaken. He knew that he was going through exactly what he had to go through in order to what? In order to teach us all we can be and all we can do. Just like that was a hard lesson. We have a hard lesson sometimes. So even when we feel forsaken, we have to remember that we are not, and that divine providence is always with us, right? Just like the little red fish in his darkest hour, when he was in the belly of the beast, he reached out, and what happened? He found himself back into a world of light, right? With many wonderful things to do and many wonderful things to learn and to experience. And then when he got to the end of his journey, rather than getting there and thinking, well, I did it. This is the end, right? I left all those greedy, selfish fish behind, and now I'm here. No, when he got there and when he realized what gift he had and how little they knew, he felt sad. He wasn't happy. He felt an obligation to them, even though they had mistreated him and mocked him and treated him badly. He knew that he had to forget about all of that because he knew it was important to love them as he loved himself. So he put himself through a lot of pain and a lot of suffering to go from his superior world back into that primitive world to try to help. How many of us do that? Very few, right? But we are on that journey. And one day we're going to get to the place where when we see pain and suffering, all we'll think about is helping and assisting. So we're all swimming down that creek, and one day we're going to be into the river, and one day we're going to get to that ocean. But when we look into our lives, there are many little red fish that have completed that journey and that are here trying to assist us, right? Countless of them. And we have to be able to see them, and we have to be able to identify them and accept what they have to share with us so that our journey is made lighter, so that we can receive the light a lot faster, so that we can share. It's never for us to keep, right? It's not ours. It's for us to share. So we are here for many purposes, right? But one thing that we have to keep in mind is that to be born, to die, to be reborn yet and again, and constantly progress, that is the law. We have to remember that there is no end, right? It's a constant moving forward. It's a constant swimming, and that's what we have to do. We have to keep on swimming. No matter how hard it is, how difficult it is, there is always light on the other side, and we have to be able to see just that. Guys, it's been an immense pleasure being with you again tonight. It's always a pleasure being here. This is probably my last talk of the year, so God willing, next year I'm here for many, many more times like this where we can learn together. Spiritism is very new to me, so I am learning. I haven't even scratched the surface. So being here gives me the opportunity to learn and learn and learn and learn, and I'm so forever thankful to you guys. So I wish you a Merry Christmas, a beautiful 2021, right? May we be resilient and walk into the new year knowing that there will be new difficulties and there will be new challenges, and that sometimes we are going to find ourselves in the belly of the beast, and there are many beasts ahead. But it is important to remember and to understand that it doesn't matter how dark the place is, how hard the time is, God is always with us. I love you all. Thank you so much.